Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the first session of Sowing Seeds. We are super excited to have you guys. We have a fine group of panelists here with us tonight. They're going to answer questions about what it is to be a good mentee, what to look for in a mentor, and ways to gain mentorship at various levels. So I hope you guys came with a bunch of questions for them because they're here to assist you and answer any of your questions and give you some advice on mentorship and networking. We do have two of our panelists here already. The other two will join us shortly. So first, we're going to start with Dr. Crystal and then Dr. Candace. So we can just have you introduce yourselves and say a little, just introduction about yourselves and what specialty you are in and your current status. And we can start off from there.
Awesome. So I'll get us started. My name is Crystal Nora. I am a PGY4 in my fourth year of internal medicine and pediatric residency at Johns Hopkins. I'm currently located in Shiprock, New Mexico on my Indian Health Services rotation. So if my service comes in and out, I apologize in advance. I am interested in adolescent medicine, so currently interviewing for fellowship right now. And I also have the privilege of serving as the treasurer for Black Girl White Coat, which is a nonprofit organization focused on mentoring as well. So excited to have this conversation with you all.
Awesome. Thank you. That's pretty exciting. Some exciting stuff coming up. So I wish you the best. All right, we can move on to Candace.
Sure. Hey, everyone. Sorry that my video is not on, but I'm very happy to be here. So I'm Candace Bailey. I'm currently a PGY4 dermatology resident in St. Louis. And next year I'll be going on to do my DermPath fellowship at my current institution. And one fun fact about me, for anyone who's interested in derm, I do sit on our AAD diversity committee, like our National Society's diversity committee, where we speak a lot and are doing a lot of planning centered around networking, mentorship, and various opportunities for medical students. So I'm happy to be here and happy to talk to y'all and answer any and all questions.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'm so glad you're able to join us. Dr. Toma, is that how you say your name? Oh, I can't hear you.
Yes. Hi. Sorry, I was trying to round a few things up. Thank you all for having me. I'm Toma Omofoye. I'm a breast radiologist. Breast is best. I am an associate professor at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas. And I'm excited to be with you all tonight.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you. We're excited to have all of you guys tonight. And we really appreciate you guys taking the time out to be here. I know you all have very busy schedules, but you decided to dedicate this hour to SNMA and its students. So we truly appreciate you guys. So without further ado, I do have a couple of questions that I want to start us off with until we get some questions in the chat. And you guys, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat or leave comments and I can ask the panelists your questions. But for our first question, I have, what advice would you give to someone seeking a mentor? And how can they identify the right mentor for their goals? So if any one of you want to tackle that question first.
I'm happy to get us started. So I think the first thing about thinking about if you want to mentor is kind of in what direction or area you're thinking about mentoring. And so if you are looking for a mentor to help you get into your specialty, that might look differently if you're just looking for a mentor to help you with your overall professional identity versus a mentor who might help you in other areas. And I say it's important to define it because I think later on we'll talk about how to approach a mentor, but it'll be helpful in trying to know what that relationship is going to look like. Say that you're in med school or you're an undergraduate and you're like hoping to learn more about the field of medicine. I think a great place to start obviously is your MAPS chapter, your SNMA, and thinking about people that have either been invited to speak that you're really excited about or people who are in the organization who might be a little bit above you as people to reach out to about like trying to pursue mentorship or a mentor-mentee relationship.
I love that answer, Crystal. I'm actually a fan of Crystal's. I've been following story for a while. So it's good to kind of learn from you tonight. Yeah, I actually agree with you 100%. I think you have to define what you're looking for, because one of the most important things is to make sure that you have set goals that you're trying to address with a mentor. I think when you're younger, mentorship can seem like when you're looking for what it's like when you're looking for a role model, right? You just want somebody who is just the dream. They're just the it girl. They just represent everything you want to be. You're looking for this one savior, really. And that's not professional mentorship. It doesn't exist, and they will let you down. I think of it as more of having a board of directors. So I have a whole board of directors. And so there are people who help me with professional goals that I'm trying to define and go after. There are people that I reach out to if I'm trying to figure out, momademia, being a mom and being in academia. There are people who I reach out to for spiritual kind of mentorship, right? And so there's a whole board of directors. And actually, as I've gotten more senior in my role now, they know about each other now. So they'll say, you should also run this by, X. And what did Y say? What did Y say about this? But you need that, because you are not trying to go and recreate somebody else's path, somebody else's career. That's not worthwhile. You'll disappoint yourself. It's more important to figure out your unique blend and then see which individuals can speak to different aspects of that. And then the way that you bring that together is part of the recipe that makes you not just unique, but impactful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because there's not one, you don't just have one mentor, you have different aspects of your life. So you can have a financial mentor, a personal mentor, somebody you need to go to for some spiritual advice or, educational advice. So there's a range, and no one person could fulfill all that. So you do have to seek what kind of mentor you want and be realistic if that person can actually fulfill those roles or not.
And I love that you said that, because I will tell you that sometimes people miss that. So I've had people who've approached me for a specific thing. Like, I want you to mentor me through the radiology residency application process, right? Okay, I know what we're working towards. And then they come in and they want to talk about like relationship stuff. That's not bad necessarily. I love to talk about relationship stuff, but that's the after hours conversation. It's 3:00. I'm in my office right now. Like, people can overhear what we're talking about. That's not the conversation we need to get into. I would have set that up for a different time, So it can make it unprofessional if you start crossing those kinds of lines. You're both going to get frustrated. At least early on in the relationship.
Yeah. You made a good point though, too, because I know from just experience when I was a first year medical student and I was like, oh my God, I have to find a mentor, somebody to coach me on campus. And it took me a while to be like, hold on, what exactly do I want out of this mentor? I'm going up to people and I'm saying, hey, can you mentor me? Mentorship can mean a bunch of different things. And they're like, okay, do you just want an ally? Like, what exactly do you want? And sometimes it's like, I don't know what I want. I just want somebody in my corner. So that's actually really good. Over time, you have to learn like exactly what do you want in this mentor? What specifically can I do for you? And so, yeah, if you need help in this application process, can you look over my personal statement? Can you talk to me about like boyfriend problems? Be specific so they know exactly where they can help you and if they're actually able to fulfill that role. So that's a very good point. All right, thank you. We're gonna move on to the next question. And again, guys who are watching online, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the chat and we'll get to them for you. Our next question, can you share a specific example of how a mentor helped you navigate a challenging situation or decision in your career? Anything that stood out?
I have a couple of examples, which is just evidence that I go to my mentors a lot about a lot of different decision points. So I'll give one example of what I like to call near peer mentors. And so sometimes our mentors are people who are professionals and who are like well advanced in their career. Sometimes we have near peer mentors who are people who may just be a couple of years ahead of us. And so this is a near peer mentor. I was in my first year of medical school. They were going into their fourth year. And so this is someone that I look to for advice on how to navigate and do different things within student organizations. And how do I like set myself up to become a good leader? And there was a the AAMC, if you're familiar with them, they're the ones who like host the MCAT, your ERAS. I think a lot of people are familiar if you're in the midst of applying for residency, but they have those organizations for medical students called the OSR. And I was trying to decide, do I run for a position or do I not run for a position? And what does it mean if I run for a national position? And this mentor was someone who had been in the organization and was able to say, given your skill set, given the things that you're really good at, I think that you would actually be playing it really small if you only ran for a school or regional position. And I really challenge you to run for a national position, which of course scared me because I hadn't done anything on a national platform like that quite before. But they were able to speak confidence into me, be able to like work through the application. And they're the reason why I was able to win this national position. And I was chair for the organization for 3 years. And so that was a good opportunity where they saw an opportunity. They were a sponsor in the sense that they identified this opportunity and really pushed me through. But then they were a mentor in the specific things that they were helping me to do and the tasks I needed to complete in order to put myself in that position to run. So that's just like one example of how near peer mentors can also be really impactful, just like a professional mentor might be.
Yeah, that's great. They seen something in you that you didn't even see in yourself. Yeah, that's important. You need people there that see your potential and push you to go forward and get you out of your comfort zone. So that was amazing. And congratulations on winning and getting that position, by the way. All right. Is there anything anyone else would like to add?
Yeah, I had actually a similar story. I have a few stories. So I had a near peer mentor. This is one of my closest friends in medical school. And at the time, someone who had just graduated from our medical school, who really were the ones who saw that radiology was the right field for me. I had never considered radiology. I was planning to go into internal medicine. I'd submitted internal medicine applications, and they're like, yeah, I don't think this is a good fit. And they were persistent, and they sat down and kind of reminded me who I was. And they said, this is what you've always said you wanted from a career. And we're just not seeing that it's all really lining up with what you're saying. And so that was one situation that was really helpful. I'll say, really, for me, where mentors have been really helpful is a trend that occurs in times of transition. When I'm trying to decide where to go for residency, how do I rank, place A versus place B on my list? Or I like place A very, very much. How do I let them know that? What's the etiquette around this new role I'm trying to transition into? You've been there. Can you show me how to approach that? That's been really helpful. But in order for a mentor to be able to help you navigate a challenging situation, the mentor needs to know you. And so one piece of advice I give to everyone is be knowable, be knowable, be knowable. When you go into a meeting with your mentor, send information ahead of time about who you are. Send your personal statement, send your CV, send whatever. It just almost doesn't matter. But then use that as a jumping off point to have discussions around who you are, so that then they know your value, right? They know all of Crystal to say, you can aim higher. If you are in a situation where you're supposed to be talking to your mentor about a challenging situation and you are tongue-tied, that's not a mentor.
Yeah.
That's not a mentor. You're so starstruck, you're so uncomfortable, you're not going to get value out of that. That is a situation where you're talking to a celebrity. Maybe you're talking to a sponsor. So it's a different conversation. And they will not be able to be successful in helping you navigate challenges if they don't know you. They don't know what you bring to the table and where you're trying to go. So yeah, that's it. I'll stop.
I think to add on to the idea of being knowable, and we might talk about this a little bit later, but that requires consistency. And that requires meeting and showing up with your mentor. And as much as we would like for other people to do the work for us, I actually find in mentor-mentee relationships, really the burden is on the mentee to keep up that relationship, right? And so I think there's a couple of things you said so many great things, a couple of things I want to really speak to. I think sometimes we get these like DMs, like, can you mentor me in this? And, you try to set up a meeting and it's just like a one-off questions. I think having a question is different than looking for mentorship. A lot of people answer questions without knowing who you are. But if you're looking for a longitudinal, so over time relationship with your mentor who is able to like follow up to know you, you have to be consistent in your meetings. And so that looks like as the mentee saying, hey, these are the things I want you to mentor me on. This is maybe a challenge that I foresee coming up or a challenge that I'm going through right now. What does it look like for us to go ahead and schedule a couple of meetings already with you? Right. And then you send your CV, you send your resume, you send your application ahead of time. And then as those meetings come up, you may say like, hey, at this meeting, can we focus on X, Y, and Z topics? I think about this because I had a mentor meeting with my mentor just a couple of days ago. Ahead of time, I was like, I want to talk about the House Staff Diversity Council, and I want to talk about some research. And then I want to talk about like some fellowship interviews. So she already knew exactly what was going on. I already had a meeting that was set up with her. And these are the meetings that we're having over time. That way, when it comes to having that challenge, it's not like, okay, let me learn everything about you in order to advise you. It's, I already know who you are. I already know what this meeting's about. I can do any prep work as your mentor if I need to, talking to other people on your behalf. And then we can actually have a productive meeting as opposed to both of us just sitting there each other, which I've definitely had before because I thought mentors were just supposed to be celebrities. And so you DM all these like really cool people you see on Instagram and they hit you with a one-word response and you're like, you're disappointed and you're like, mentoring mentee isn't for me, but you didn't realize, like Dr. Thomas said, that you needed to find the right person for you.
Yeah. Wow. That's a very good point. How many times have I said in a meeting, I'm like, oh, wow, I was not intentional about this. You know, you have to be intentional. What exactly do you want? What questions do you have for this person? Not like, hey, I'm glad that you know me and can you speak on my behalf? And they don't even know you yet. So you definitely have to be intentional as a mentee and give them an outline. So that was perfect. I do want to tune in to what Dr. Candace Bailey has to say. She said her mentors have been amazing at helping her tune into herself. While applying to the DermPath Fellowship, she was very torn on how to approach interviews and figuring out what institution was best for her. Because she cultivated such strong relationships with her mentors, they helped remind her of the values they've seen in her over the years and making sure she chose an institution that would help her stay aligned with those values. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Bailey. I will get on to the next question. I don't see any questions in the chat as of yet. So the third question, how do you balance formal mentorship programs with informal networking opportunities for career growth? So I'm going to repeat that again. How do you balance formal mentorship programs with informal networking opportunities for career growth?
I'll speak to this a little bit. First of all, I'll say that formal mentorship programs are probably more effective earlier in your career. And formal mentorship programs, I think you get out of them what you put into them. So, for example, you may start at a new institution and they say, we have a big SIB, little SIB program. That's a formal mentorship relationship, right? They just picked two people, sometimes just out of thin air and put them together. Sometimes they do try to match you on a few things. You have the same undergrad or whatever, but a lot of the time they just put them together. They can be beneficial, but they're usually going to be beneficial on big picture type things, right? Like, how do I pass this physiology test? Is this somebody who I have to memorize the lectures or memorize the textbook, right? So they can be beneficial, but often it tends to be starting from a very, I hate to say it, generic starting point. And then over time, you may be able to infuse more personality, more of your value system to help it blossom into something else. As you get more senior, as you're graduating med school, you're selecting a specialty. I mean, that's so big. When you're selecting a residency program, that's so big. Those sorts of things, your uniqueness is important. And so you need actually that one-on-one relationship. Now with networking, so this is the scenario where you connect with someone online or wherever, and you kind of pursue that one-on-one. I think those networking opportunities can be great, but they have to be defined. That's a problem, is that the formal mentorship can be rigid, and the networking can be so flexible that it's unhelpful. So you kind of have to infuse the same principles into both, which is informal mentorship. You need to start bringing in parts of your personality that will help things blossom. So I've been in formal mentorship relationships where they've actually said, you know what? I think you would connect really well with my husband because you guys have a similar personality or X, Y, and Z. And so they would bring them into the mentorship relationship, right? Then it became a team mentorship. Or you would connect really well with, this colleague of mine. And that's actually part of how I ended up with a board of directors, is that as they started to know me more, they would sometimes start to refer because they weren't necessarily skilled to handle certain things. With networking, though, like Crystal was saying, it's very, very important. You have to really show up. So you send an agenda before that meeting. You send discrete notes, questions that they need to work off of. You send follow-up. You have a schedule. I have some mentees who do this so well. They're so good. I bet they have a timer set on their calendar. Every 3 months. You do?
Every 3 months.
So good at it. She every 3 months is almost on the dot. And she's like, hi, just checking in. I have finished, rotation X, Y, and Z, and I am now on this. How are you? And it's perfect because it keeps her top of mind. So if an opportunity comes up, it's just enough contact that I can say, hey, let's sit down. I want to run an opportunity by you. Right. So networking, you can get out of it what you put into it.
Absolutely. I'm going to feed off of that because I actually received some great advice from my big, and she told me about this timer that she set. She's like, every 3 months, she has a list of mentors that she updates, like, hey, just so you know, I did finish this and I took the shelf, or I'm going to this conference and I'm presenting and I would, like you to come if you can, just updating them. And she'll send an updated CV as well. And she even sends like an updated headshot, like just in case you want to put a face to like a CV, this is me. And I thought that was like, wow, that is very creative, just to keep yourself in their mind, after a while when you leave a rotation or whatnot, sometimes you don't see those people again and they have other students and you don't want to be lost in the flood of, other students. So it's good just to stay relevant, even if it's nothing major. I know as a medical student, something has happened within 3 months while you're in school. So just updating your mentor and sending an updated CV or headshot, or just, hey, just so you know, I still appreciate you and would still like to stay in contact, even if we can set up like a 20-minute Zoom just to chat and, get updated. Would you mind doing that? So those are some good ideas. So I'm glad that you said that. It reminded me of what I've heard from her. So I wanted to share.
It's very effective. And it doesn't, it's nice if you get the CV and all of that, but we also understand that you're busy. So don't put too much pressure on it. The problem is if you put too much pressure on it, you don't do it at all. And then the relationship kind of dissipates, right? It kind of disintegrates over time. Times of transition, right? When July 1 came around, there were a couple of people that sent text messages that was like, hey, it's been almost a year because I was in the hole with intern year, but I'm starting radiology now. And, I'm at such and such place. And thank you for your help, in med school, right? So even just that text message, it's enough. We love to hear from you. Don't be shy about it. But if you do formalize something, it's great. And let me tell you the other tip. If you're sending your mentors updates like that, when it comes time to write a letter of recommendation for you, it's very easy for me. I have a whole folder. I actually have a folder for each mentee. I've never said this to anyone before. I do. I have a folder. So now I can just pull up the folder because there are certain things that you do that don't really end up on your CV. But now I have a record of it in a way that I can build a story around it, an anecdote around it to put it into a letter of recommendation. So it definitely helps you. I've used that to recommend people for positions and stuff over time.
Wow, it's so nice to hear that from the other end. So I hope that everyone heard that on the line.
I think it's helpful. And I think the question that may come up is like, how do I actually then connect to my mentor? And I think this is where professionalism and understanding the relationship that you have with your mentor and your mentee comes into play. So I think if it's like the first time that you're meeting a professor, someone who maybe is in more like an academic or has like a titled position, I think keeping it via email until they introduce the idea of like, oh, here's my phone number. I always give my mentees and my mentors my phone number to have just in case. And I think the more professional you can be, the safer you will always be to make sure that you don't cross any boundaries. I think getting back to what are the things that we talk about with our mentor and what are the things that we talk about with our mentees. I think like in college, I went to UT Austin, and in college, we'd always have like mentors and mentees, but they were really just like your party older sibs. So they're like, they would bring you to over like to every single party, and they would make sure that you knew which parties to go to. And that was the kind of thing where you could text them and be like, hey, what's up? This is like, all the kind of trouble I got into. That's not the same type of relationship, mentor-mentee, that you want to always have. Now with like a near peer mentor or someone that you've really connected with over the years, or even over the past couple of months, it may turn into more of like a casual, where like, not just about my professional life, but a little bit about my personal life as well too. I think that's where your judgment, your discernment, and your professionalism will come in. Because what you don't want to happen is that this is the program director that you've been talking with, and you're texting them. You're like, oh my gosh, guess what I did this weekend? And you're starting to cross professional lines. And so I think the best way when it comes to communicating with your mentors and mentees, keep it on email. And then if they introduce the idea of giving you their phone number, hey, like if you ever need anything, here you go, send a text message. When it comes to social media, I think social media is a great place to reach out to folks. I think sometimes it can be a hard place to sustain an actual conversation. I've had people reach out to me in Twitter, and the Twitter DMs is just, it's hard to keep up with. So I think at that point, offer your email to say, hey, I'm really interested. I've seen the things that you've been tweeting about. I think that, you might be able to help me in these extra areas. If you have the time and you're willing to, be one of my mentors, would you mind if I emailed you? What is a good email to reach out to you from there? And again, I think it's all about professionalism, all about knowing what kind of boundaries, understanding that some of those boundaries change over time as you may, go from mentor-mentee to more of like, sometimes I think about like some of my mentors, it's like, oh, that's my big cousin, that's my auntie. Like it's a little bit more casual. But I think if you're ever in doubt, always stay professional.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you touched upon that, because that was going to be my next question, is how do you guys feel about mentees or other students reaching out to you via text message or social media? But you made a good point. It's a good way to introduce yourself if you do not have their email or another formal way of communication, to say, hey, what's a better way to communicate with you, instead of having a whole paragraph and essay and stuff on social media. So that was a good point.
And you can always ask. You can always ask your mentor, well, what is like, some people may be like, yeah, email, I don't actually check that. I'm more likely to just like respond to a text message. So I think it's important just to be like, hey, what is the best way to get in contact with you? Would you be okay if I emailed you or texted you or called you? Do you prefer Zoom? Do you prefer like in-person meetings? Like, I think it's totally, sometimes it feels awkward. Like, should I have to ask those things? Just ask at the beginning of the relationship. Again, understanding that may change, but I think it's also important to understand what your mentor prefers. And they may just prefer being like, hey, I like calls because I have a long commute, and it's easier for me to take up those calls. And that way, when I get home, I spend that time with my family. So you can always ask if you're in doubt.
Mm-hmm. Better to ask than not ask and be left wondering. So I agree. We do have a question in the chat. It says, what would you say to introverts who are terrified of networking or find it awkward?
Well, I will say that I actually think I'm a reformed introvert, even though people who know me don't believe this. I would say you just need to find an extrovert to adopt you. That's actually what you need. When you approach someone for the first time, I actually think introverts have an advantage in that you tend to be really thoughtful and intentional about interactions, like one-on-one interactions. So I don't think that being an introvert gives you a disadvantage. I actually think it's an advantage, because you usually have really crystallized in your mind why you're approaching this person and what it is that you want to say to them, and how you're going to run that conversation. So I think that you tend that clear-mindedness comes through as professionalism, actually. So it works really well. Sometimes people who are very extroverted can want to turn the first meeting really social, right? And start to go down that road. So that's fine. What I'll say about it is, just like anything else, networking is a skill. You just need to learn, and you need to practice. So there are books that talk about this. There are podcasts that talk about this. I think you figure out one skill at a time that you're building. You don't need to have 10 mentors. You need maybe 2. So you start with the people who seem warm. Look, if you're on Twitter, you can figure out within a couple tweets, scrolling somebody's timeline, like, is this somebody I can approach or not? Pretty easily. I mean, you can tell. You'll see even the way other people retweet them or whatever. You can tell if this is somebody who is open. And then you approach them and say, look, I been hesitant about this, but I really am just charmed by you or whatever. And I want to learn from you. And these are the kinds of things I would love to learn from you. Are you open to taking on a mentee? Can we talk over email, right? And you start with email, which allows you to be really careful about your words, right? You can be in your comfort zone as you draft that, and then you can progress to full conversation. Networking doesn't have to be about walking into a party of 500 people and, being interesting enough that somebody just wants to talk to you. You can actually take advantage of one-on-one relationships and I think the kind of intentionality that comes with being an introvert and capitalize on that.
Yeah, some good feedback.
When you're also, sometimes this comes up if you're going to conferences and you're like, oh my goodness, like I heard this person speak on this like really fantastic panel, like what, how, and sometimes there's like a line that's like behind this person and you're like, ooh, like, I don't know. I think one, you can always, sometimes they leave their contact information. You can always, again, if that feels a little bit more comfortable. I think too, as already said, like having a specific question and recognizing that the first time you meet that person may not be the time to make the big ask. Like, oh, can you be my mentor or mentee, right? But I think it might be like, hey, I really loved the conversation that you did about the new advances in breast radiology. Would it be okay if I got your contact information and we could just talk a little bit more? And so maybe there's not like a very specific ask at that moment because there's a line of people behind you. That might be one way to do it. But let's say you're at the conference after party or the conference happy hour. I think sometimes just getting people to talk about themselves is really easy. So like, what are you really excited in your work? What do you see next 5 years in your field? Like if you can ask them and get them to start talking about themselves, that might give you a little bit of a position to be like, okay, we're having a conversation and it doesn't feel like it's all on me to say the right things. I think have an easy way to contact you. So be able to give out your phone number, be able to give out your email, also have a way to connect their information. I know sometimes putting in a phone is really helpful if you're going to conferences, collecting business cards. But I will say the number one mistake that students and I think people make is that they go to conferences, they make all of these great connections and they do absolutely nothing with them.
They get lost in follow-up.
People have told me like, oh my gosh, I'm going to connect with you. I'm so excited to meet you. Like, I really love what you're doing in this space and you're doing in this space. And then you kind of go home from the conference and you're like, I thought I was popping. Ain't nobody talked to me yet. I do the same thing when I go to conferences. I meet so many wonderful people. I forget to follow up. So if you're thinking about all these SNMA conferences that you're going to, maybe it's a regional conference, maybe it's big AMAC that's happening in New Orleans, I would say, literally on your plane ride home, on your train ride home, go ahead and type up those emails, type up those messages that you're going to send. Set a timer if you want to, if you don't want to seem too eager for like the next Monday at like 9 a.m., but go ahead and do that next step because a lot of people fall through when it comes to following up. And you don't want that to be you because those can be really great connections that you make.
Yes, you're giving away all of my secrets right now.
I love that. The other thing you can do as well is actually take advantage of whoever's already networked with them. So you can have some people who, sorry, it's bedtime, y'all. So if you are interested in someone, you can ask your department chair, your colleague or whatever who does a similar kind of research. Do you know them? Can you put me in contact with them? Do you think that's someone who would be a good mentor for me? So that's a way to network without having to compete with a large crowd. Then you can get just a one-on-one email invitation. But I want to follow up on another thing Crystal really said. You mentioned one of the biggest mistakes people make is not following up. I'll say that, and I'm gonna double down on it. When you do have that first meeting, let's say you sent your CV, you did X, Y, and Z, you sat here and they said, here's how you can get the research project. And then you don't follow up after that. That's a problem, right? So if the mentor, you've done the hard work of networking now, you've had that first meeting, under promise, over deliver. So you want to send an email after that meeting to say, hey, you suggested I talk with this person about joining their lab or this, that, and the other. Here's the outcome of that. That for me is one of the biggest things. That's part of that first impression. So the people who remember to do that, who remember to circle back, I'm like, okay, this one's going into the keep pile, like they're legit. Because unfortunately, what can happen sometimes is I as a mentor may get approached by so many people. And at the beginning, there's 20 people and I'm trying to keep track of all of these. And and you're investing in all of these people, and then they just disappear into thin air, which can be kind of sad. So the people who follow up, I'm like, this is gold, right? We're both winning here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Follow up, guys. I'm actually typing some of this down so that I don't forget. This is good. This is good information. Thank you. We do have another question in the chat. Someone says, how do you know when you are ready to be a mentor?
I heard a saying once that you're not a leader if nobody's following you. I mean, I think everybody has the capacity to mentor. Everybody has that capacity, but you don't really assume the title unless somebody is in that relationship with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a two-way relationship. I think you have the capacity. If you're thinking of it, you can probably do it, and you can probably do it well, right? It's just that part of having that title is because now you have somebody who is, giving you that honor, that privilege of calling you their mentor.
Yes. Thank you. Nice for you to join us, Dr. Davis. Thank you so much for joining. I know you have a very busy schedule, so we appreciate you taking the time out to be with us this evening.
Glad to be here. Sorry I'm late.
No problem at all. We're happy that you're here. Would you mind just doing a quick introduction of who you are, where you are in your education, and what specialty you're currently in?
Yes, Jared Davis. I'm 5 years into practice as a plastic surgeon at University of Mississippi in Jackson. I went to medical school at Meharry, class of 2010, and I did general surgery residency followed by plastic surgery residency at the University of Louisville.
Awesome. That's very impressive. Thank you. We were just on the question, how do you know when you are ready to become a mentor? I am going to read the response from Dr. Candace Bailey. And if you want to simmer with that question, I could come to you after I read her response, okay?
Okay.
All right. So Dr. Bailey says, I would say you can be a mentor to someone at any level. I think the biggest thing is knowing and recognizing when you have the capacity to become a mentor. Mentorship takes time, and while more of the work is on the mentee, there is still a lot of work on the mentor side. If you're going to be a good mentor, and she emphasizes good, I have a mentor-mentee relationships that exist in so many forms, and a lot of them developed in a myriad of ways. Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Dr. Davis, would you like to comment at all? Or how do you know when you are ready to become a mentor?
So I think to be a mentor, you have to have first been the mentee. And so having had several relationships, and I feel like I'm currently both a mentor and a mentee still, which is important to highlight. We all mentor people and we're mentored as well. And if the mentee is not doing their work, that can become a lot of work for the mentor. And I think most mentors are more than willing to invest, but that investment is basically coming with the assumption that the mentee puts in work as well. And so to be a good mentor, you have to have gone through the stage of the process and learned how to be a good mentee first.
We did touch some points earlier of what it means to be a good mentee, being intentional about what you expect from your mentor, and actually come in with questions, and say, hey, I actually want you to help me out with this application, or to review my CV and talk about these points, or, look over my personal statement, and not being so social in the beginning, but being intentional about what actually you want from that mentor, and understanding that mentors can serve different purposes, and being realistic, like, can this mentor actually fulfill these goals that I actually have set out? So we did talk about that. So you kind of blended in that response. So thank you for that.
If I could add one thing to that, I think that closed loop communication is very important. So if your mentor gives you a task, you want to complete the task in a timely fashion and communicate that it's done And that's how you get to the next part of the task. And, we're all busy. It's very easy to get a task and to kind of put it on the bookshelf and forget about it for a while. And, if you take the mentor-mentee relationship seriously on both sides, there's a back and forth and closed loop communication.
Mm. Absolutely.
Can I ask a question of the panelists?
Yes.
And I guess the attendees as well. What is it that you think a mentor gets out of being a mentor? What do you think is the reward for mentors and being mentors?
So I think as an individual, as a surgeon, I love doing surgery, but I can help a finite number of patients. But through mentees, I feel like I can help an infinite number of patients. And I also realize that everyone else, I wouldn't be where I am without having mentors. And so it's really just kind of a desire to pay it forward and to have a bigger impact than I could have alone.
Thank you for that. It's like I wasn't intending to plan it, but I think this is important for people to hear, because as a mentee, it can feel really intimidating to approach someone. You just feel like you're some sort of leech that's just like sucking the blood out of this person who's already busy. But I think the way Dr. Davis put it is really important. It's like, this actually allows me to expand my reach. It allows me to expand my ability to help people. So if you keep that in mind as a mentee, you then know that there's a part of this that benefits the mentor as well. Mm-hmm. And it makes it more real to you why it is important for you to close the loop in that conversation, right? Because they're pouring into you part of what they wish they could do themselves. They wish they could go back and do it this way with the shortcut, right? So you can help more people sooner. And so when you come back and say, yeah, I did it, that's the reward for the mentor. And so if you don't close that loop, it's like, well, that just never panned out, right?
Yeah. It does help take some of the stress off of you as a mentee. Like, oh my God, I am feeling like I'm pulling the soul out of this person. I'm asking. But I am both a mentor and a mentee as well. And I like when my mentees reach out to me and, they feel comfortable enough to ask for my expertise in something. Like, oh, wow, someone actually wants to, know my input on something. So it does feel good when you are a mentor, you're able to like give back in a certain type of way, So thank you for asking that question to the panelists. We appreciate that. We do have 15 minutes left on this session. So guys who are watching, if you do have any last minute questions or comments, please make sure that you drop them in the chat so that we can get to them in a timely fashion. I will move on to a question that I have for you guys. What are some creative or unconventional ways you've seen people successfully network or seek mentorship opportunities? And so I'll ask that again. What are some creative or unconventional ways you've seen people successfully network or seek mentorship opportunities?
Oh, I have one. I thought of one now. This was a high school student. She was like 15 at the time. And she reached out to interview me for her podcast. Isn't that the coolest thing? She's 15. Her and her best friend have this podcast where they interview physicians in different specialties because they are trying to decide what they want to do with their lives. But how cool is that to say, hey, we're trying to do, I mean, it is impossible to say no to two 15-year-old girls who are not only trying to learn from you, they want to disseminate that information to their friends as well. It's like, that's so generous that they're doing that. So yeah, I was in. I was a goner.
It's pretty cool that everyone has podcasts nowadays. So it's like, do you want to come to my podcast? Like, wow.
I'm on the podcast asking them questions like, so what else are your hobbies? Did you guys just podcast all the time? And we do like, karate and we're black belts. I mean, it's like a million things, right? It's like, you guys are cool. Let's be friends. So it's nice.
Awesome. Does anyone else want to comment on that question, or is it safe to move on to the next one?
So I think purpose was highlighted in there. So the podcast was kind of a purpose and the foundation for the relationship. A research project could serve the same purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Asking someone to host a suture clinic or to learn a skill, but just having a reason for engagement, I think applies to other similar situations like that.
Yeah, that's a good one people have done is say, will you come speak to our student interest group for XYZ? So that's actually something I tell my mentees. If you have the opportunity to serve on a student interest group, that's actually a way that you can build your network as well. So keep that in mind, like have the big picture in mind.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to move on to a question that's in the chat. What are some ways you've learned to own your space when it comes to networking? How do you own your space? I'm guessing that means like, how do you become confident enough to, believe in yourself and go up to someone and actually say, hey, I want you to be my mentor?
If you're a quiet person and let's say you go to a conference, I think it's a good idea to give yourself a reasonable goal. Like, I want to meet 5 people, because it may be easy for you to talk to the 1 or 2 people that you know, but say, I want to meet 5 people. And, maybe out of those 5 people, I want to exchange information with 2 or 3. And if you exchange information, again, you need to close the loop and send a message, say, hey, it was nice to meet you. Is there research I could be involved with? Could you come and talk at our interest group? But you really have to put yourself out there. And I think that's harder if you have a more introverted personality, which I tend to be that way. But I tell my mentees that I see that in that they have to put themselves out there, because oftentimes you'll be in the room with the very people that you want to meet or benefit from meeting, but you put the barrier in your own head by saying they won't remember me, or you met them before and you assume they don't remember you. But you just have to put yourself out there. And the other thing is, I think you would be amazed. Some of the people that you would assume wouldn't remember you, because they meet a lot of people, are really good at remembering names and faces. They will remember you. But, I always give them grace. I'd say, hey, I'm Jared. We met, 2 years ago at this conference, and that gives them a way out. So if they don't remember, oh, Jared, hey, yeah, I remember. It was good to meet you. But you really have to step outside yourself.
I love it. I'm like writing down things because I don't want to forget. You mentioned, when you're in the room with people that you want to meet, and you might miss out on that. I think that that's part of what you need to communicate to them, is why you're approaching them. So each person has a brand, and that's sometimes what's memorable about someone, right? If they're coming and they're telling me, I was at a conference where someone said, I drove, 8 hours because I couldn't afford the plane ticket to come here. But I had to be at this conference. Like, that's the brand in my head. It's like, okay, this is the go-getter. I know who you are, right? So a little anecdote like that can be really helpful. And you're likely attracted to somebody in that room because you know some part of their story that demonstrates that same trait, right? So I would share that part of the story so that you build that connection in a bi-directional format, right? The other thing is, if you want to own your space, one thing you can do is approach a mentor with the people you're comfortable with. Let's say you have a friend, you're both here for the same purpose, and it's somebody that you feel calm around. You can go together. You're an introvert. This is your extrovert friend. You guys go together and approach. You can do that. We've done that where, 2 of us will email someone together to say, we're interested in the same thing. That's perfectly fine. And because you're there with your friend, you're probably a little bit less tongue-tied, and you can communicate more freely. So that is helpful. I'll say the other thing about owning your space is that I just kind of go through life thinking that people are going to love me. And I learned this from my husband, but it's actually a really good trick. Because if you're coming in assuming good intentions of them, right? You're thinking they're going to like me. We're going to be friends. There's a lightness to the communication, and things just flow better. You may not connect. It may not be perfect, right? Like, they may not be a mentor for the next 10 years, but you're not weighed down so much by, fear and negativity that you don't really engage. So if you come in assuming good intention, assuming positive outcomes, I think things tend to have just a more positive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on the flip side of that too is recognizing that the worst thing really anyone can say is, no, I don't have the capacity or the space or the time to do it. And I think when I like started to become like the resident who was being asked to like sit on the med student panel, or like the med student who was asked to sit in the high school panel, and you were saying no, not because you weren't interested, but like, oh, I have a shelf exam, or like I'm in clinic, or, you know, they were very like reasonable things in my mind where I'm like, oh, I'd love to do it, but I can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. But as the med student or as a resident, you're like, oh my gosh, like they absolutely hate me. That's why I should never reach out to them again. Like it's because they would rather talk to anyone else in the world, not knowing that like there are perfectly good reasons that people may be saying no. And I think a couple of things is if you reach out to someone via email, and let's say it's been like a week, one, it's possible as a resident who has like a very big email, they just missed your email. So I think it's totally appropriate and fine to send up a follow-up email. Now, I would send like 7 follow-up emails. I think that's sometimes maybe a little bit much, and I've seen that happen. But I would just say if it's been a week, you haven't heard any communication, assume good intent, assume that they're just really busy and they haven't reached inbox 0, and just say, hey, just following up, just, you know, wondering if you still had any opportunity to talk. And if they take it upon themselves to answer, that's great. If they don't, then you're like, I tried, gave it my good effort, and I don't have to like try to worry about it because maybe they just didn't see it, or maybe now is not a good time. Or maybe the fact that they're not answering you is probably also the sign that they may not have the capacity to take on a mentor or mentee at that time. And so
they're doing you a favor.
Absolutely.
If they try to take it on and they don't have that capacity, now you're in this weird kind of tension, right?
Exactly. And so I think it's okay if people aren't able to do what you ask, because sometimes what they can do, they may be someone who says, I may not be the good person for this. You're asking me about like surgery, and while I love my surgery colleagues, I am not the person to help you navigate this. Let me actually connect you with someone else who may be a better fit for you, right? That's a win. Or someone who says, maybe not right now. I'm like currently writing a grant and like, but I might have time in a couple of months. Would you mind like reconnecting with me in a couple of months and we can talk about this? Also a win. So I don't want you to walk into there and being like, if they say no, it's the worst thing in the world. A no could really be a blessing for you. And also redirection, just find someone else who may be able to help out. And so maybe taking some of that pressure off of what that no means. It's not always a reflection of who you are. Oftentimes it's a reflection of what that person has capacity to do.
And can I just add one? I love everything you said. I want you to remember that what you're doing is paying them a compliment. You're paying somebody a compliment. So people generally receive those requests well. Even if they're saying no, it's still, I mean, you're flattering them. It's a privilege to be asked to walk life with somebody, right? So realize that that's what you're doing. It's not combative. It's not demanding. It's a compliment.
Yes, thank you. And you made a very good point, Christo, about, you know, just people are busy, you know, don't take it personal if someone doesn't respond to your first email. You guys have very busy schedules, and you know, have other things happening in your life. So I'm a big fan of, hey, if they didn't respond right now, maybe they're busy. I'm going to follow up with them in the next month and say, hey, you know, do you have time now? And my magic number is 3. I don't know if that's on the excessive side or not, but, you know, I give them 3 good times before I'm like, okay, maybe I should, you know, look somewhere else, or this person isn't able to get to me in a timely manner. So 7 is a bit much. Maybe 3 is a bit much, but so somewhere between 2 or 3, I feel like, you know, if they didn't respond, don't take it personal. You know, they're not trying to hurt your feelings. Maybe they're just busy. It's not like you're a bad person, or, you know, they don't want to do it, but you guys are busy. So thank you for that.
And I'd also add, especially, and this is something that I found helpful as more of like a resident growing into like my career, is sometimes if you have an existing mentor, having them review how you're communicating and reaching out. I think especially like for like people that I mentor that are in high school or undergrad, the idea of professionalism and what professional communication and how to be taken seriously online isn't always there. So if you're reaching out to someone that you're like, ooh, I'm a little bit nervous, it's never a bad thing. Even if it's just like, I don't have an official mentor, I'm looking for one, and it's like your med school advisor, and just be like, hey, can you like look over this email? Because for me, I'm also looking at like, is this email like super short, super informal? Like, are there a bunch of like misspell? Like, you know, like those are all parts of things that your first impression. And so if you are like, I'm reaching out to like the program director, the head of this lab, you know, maybe it might be a good idea if it's like a really high stakes thing that you're really invested in to like run it by someone to be like, hey, like any concerns or like any updates, or like you're even like with your CV, like, hey, can someone just like proofread this before I like send this off with a lot of mistakes? Granted, there's always grace. And I think people are always going to assume that you just want to have a good relationship, but also someone may have a lot of emails that are coming their way and they're having to decide, okay, like, how am I going to decipher this? And you want to put yourself in the best light. So it's never a bad idea too, to like sometimes run your communication by other people, because also you may be thinking that you're being really straightforward and clear, and someone reads your email and be like, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking this person to do. So that kind of feedback, even that's coming for your friends, can be helpful.
Yes, for sure. I have my friends read my emails all the time, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to send this. And then I'm like, hey, can you read this really quick? And they're like, this is not clear. You should not send this and make these edits. So it is definitely a huge advantage having someone look over an extra pair of eyes, even if it's not another professional, just someone to see, like, double check that it's clear, there's no errors, and it makes sense. So that's a great point. Thank you. It is about 9:00 Eastern time right now. And so that is the end of our first session. And I think it was a beautiful session. Thank you, guys. Thank you to our panelists tonight for taking this hour to be with us. We appreciate you. And yeah, thank you for being here. I will let you go. I know you guys are very busy.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your evening, guys.
All right. Good night.
Yes, good night.